Let me tell you a very, very interesting story. Okay?
Not every case comes wrapped up with a neat little bow. Some cases leave us with more questions than answers, and Fox Hollow Farms, that's one of them. But here's something important to remember: everything in this episode comes from one man, Mark Goodyear. His words, his accusations, his version of events. And as we'll see, his story isn't always consistent. In fact, Mark has been inconsistent throughout his retelling events, but one thing is clear: he wants to control the narrative. And that starts with a riddle he's repeated multiple times: I'm not an accomplice. I'm not a victim. I was never attacked. What am I? He wasn't eliminated as a suspect, but he wasn't officially tied to the crimes either. Yet, almost everything we know about what happened at Fox Hollow Farm comes from him. Mark says he met Herb at Club 501 in August of 1994, standing in front of the missing person posters. They talked about the disappearances, and then in a move that doesn't quite add up, Mark says he pushed Herb out of the door, but Herb didn't resist. Next thing you know, they're in a car heading straight for Fox Hollow Farm. According to Mark, this visit at his house felt uneasy, yet he stayed the whole night and part of the morning. He exchanged numbers with Herb, stayed in contact, and even had him over for dinner. And despite repeatedly calling Herb a creep and that he's insane, he continued to meet up with him. He later claimed Herb was stalking him, but then admitted to following Herb into bars, standing on tables, and warning people that Herb was a killer. He paints himself as the victim, yet time and time again, he chose to stay in Herb's orbit. In fact, their relationship grew so close that, according to Mark, Herb eventually confessed to unaliving 56 people. Whether out of fear, fascination, or something else entirely, Mark stayed in Herb's world and even claimed to be terrified of him. Then Mark's story takes a strange turn. He says one night he grabbed a vacuum hose from the pool, gently pressed it against his throat, and then pulled it away. Mark also claims that he was the one who drugged Herb, knocking him out for just 40 minutes, and that Herb actually thanked him for it. But how much of this is true? And how much is just Mark trying to control the story? Then there's the missing evidence. Herb was a huge videographer. He had cameras, recordings, equipment, and according to Mark, a hidden video recorder in the ceiling of his basement. Mark claims Herb even showed him some of these tapes. But when Herb's wife Julie led detectives to where the tapes were usually kept, they were gone. On January 25th, 1996, Mark says he was watching the news coverage of the Fox Hollow Farm dig, and Herb was sitting right next to him on the couch watching it too. The police had no idea where he was, and a reporter finally tracked him down, called him directly, and Herb casually told them he was in Indianapolis, but soon he was heading to Canada. And that's exactly what he did. He crossed the border, and when Canadian police found him sleeping in his car, they noticed a box of videotapes in the back seat. But 2 days later, in Primary Provincial Park, Herb was found unalived. The theory here is that Herb unalived himself. And the tapes, well, they were gone. When Mark is asked, do you think that Herb would ever unalive himself? He doesn't answer. Instead, like he's done throughout the whole interview, he smirks and says, we'll save that for another time. Then he adds something else. Herb's fingers were so swollen, Mark claims, like sausages, too swollen to pull the. So did he? Then the conversation takes a weird turn. The interview confronts Mark about something he hadn't addressed before: a man by the name of Leroy Bray. Leroy accused Mark in participating in an unaliving at Fox Hollow Farm in 1995. But Leroy has since passed, and the only living witness, you guessed it, Mark Goodyear. No names cleared, no justice served, no closure. But what this documentary has done is shed more light on the case, and in the shadows of Fox Hollow Farm, the truth still waits. My deepest condolences go out to the victims, their families, and anyone affected by these events. I truly hope that shedding light on this case can help bring clarity, justice, and most importantly, closure.